Good good morning. Good morning. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Britton Jacobson, director at Everfli. Good morning, Britton. How you doing?
Good morning. I am doing very well. It's a bright and sunny day, so always a positive.
Yeah, bright and sunny day here in the Bay Area too. Yeah, you're right. Always a positive. So to start with, can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I have, right before I came to Everfli, which I've been at Everfli, which is my current company, for about 2 years and 8 months or so. Before that, I was at a startup graduate school in Washington, D.C., and I was there for 2.5 years. And I joined as a warm body in a startup,
Hmm.
and then was kind of slotted to be the director of operations and then director of facilities, and went through four different leadership changes over the course of the 2.5 years. We were in the Washington Post for maybe some nefarious dealings by some
Hmm.
of those executives, and I was one of the people that was keeping the wheels on the wagon. And that was like kind of my first foray into the business world outside of my previous pursuits. And at the time, I kind of became very attracted to business world, to private enterprise. And so that's how I kind of decided to pursue that as a direction. Originally, I was more on the government, paramilitary, counterterrorism track. And so that was my first foray into business. And I enjoyed it. I love the corporate management and personality management, and then corporate strategy components the most. And so, following kind of some smoother sailing waters with that startup, I then moved over to Everfli. And then at Everfli, I'm the director of facilities in the operations department. And I'm based in Washington, D.C., but we have had remote offices in kind of across the country. And I oversaw the build out of our global HQ here in DC, and that was about 60,000 square feet. And we've got another
Hmm.
20,000 square feet of expansion space that we've partially built out some of it. And my role has kind of been a combination of the organizing and designing the processes and policies behind and supporting the operations department, so that we are providing consistent daily business support to the people that are actually running the company and the people that are supporting it in sales and engineering and product.
Hmm.
And then there's also been an element of my role that has been associated with kind of the cultural management and strategic workforce planning, and kind of the corporate strategy elements of what we're doing within the office and within different teams to kind of support what's happening and the communications that are happening in the office. And then obviously most recently, I've been a member of the COVID task force, both in the going remote situation, and then now we're in the middle of executing on our plan to return to the office. And so that's kind of where I've been at.
Oh, cool. So tell us what Everfi does. It's an interesting company. It's kind of unique, I think. So give us the lowdown on it.
Yeah, so it was started kind of right in 2008, a little bit after the financial crisis kind of kicked off. And there were three co-founders, and what their vision was is to build a company that is focused on social impact issues. And so where that journey's kind of led us today is we are officially a global education technology company. And so what we do is we own our own engineering platform, and then on that platform or within that platform, we build digital courses for K through 12 higher education institutions and direct to business. And those courses are all oriented towards social impact issues. So, for instance, in our K through 12 courses, courses for our K through 12 schools, we'll have like a 306, which is African American history. We have compassion, which is an anti-bullying, and then a few things like that. And then, for instance, on our higher education ones, we'll have sexual harassment prevention, alcohol abuse prevention, and then kind of similar related things for the workforce: sexual harassment in the workplace, best practices within the office, things like that. And our kind of big visionary goal and plan, which we actually just announced and released like within the last week and a half or so, is to really develop our services as an impact as a service company and platform. And our goal is to kind of continue partnering with major institutions to provide the courses for K through 12 for free to those schools and those teachers, and then partner directly with higher education institutions and businesses with the plan and desire to be to continue impacting people in a positive way in that directly is related to how they're living their life. So like a great example of that and in the past and going forward is financial education. It's one of our biggest verticals and biggest impacts that we're having is helping people learn, at the earliest stages how to manage their finances and how to understand how the world runs.
Mm, interesting. So I mean, like, can the average person sign up for your service, or is it done at the organization level?
So my understanding is that most of it is done at the organization level, but for I think probably the best example of most individuals is going to be like on the homeschooling side. And we have a way for homeschoolers, like whether through a co-op or things like that, to get into our K through 12 courses. And then if it's college age or those sorts of students or people that maybe haven't had the course at their particular college, we're pretty well dispersed throughout colleges. So the likelihood of someone having had access to our courses is actually pretty significant.
Mm,
And then when it comes to individual, we do have a direct outreach platform. You can call us or email us and that sort of thing. And I'm sure there's a way to get people connected.
mm,
That's a little bit outside my realm of experience and
mm.
expertise, but uh, we've done so far done a pretty good job of reaching people where they need it.
Yeah, well, interestingly, you joined, you said 2.5 years ago, about right.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit about a year later. I have to believe that demand for your services increased because everything went remote at that point, correct?
Yeah, it was a interesting time for us. I think that is like with anything, there's pros and cons and opportunities that kind of swing both ways. And so I think in one way is it was the whole pandemic situation. I think relative to people not having savings and things along those lines. I think it was an excellent continued wake up call as to the need for financial education, for proper, education. I think some of the social turmoil, right, I think pointed to some of the other social impact issues that we've tried to address and want to continue to address with our courses. And so I think in those ways, there are a lot of positives. I think in some of the other ways, and again, like I'm not sitting in the sales team or
Mm.
the C-suite or anything like that, but I think one of the other sides of that is and why we want to build impact as a service into a substantive business uh, organization and partnership is because those are often those are easily the things that get left behind, right? It's like, well, we need to teach our kid math, maybe we can push off an anti-bullying course, right? And it's like the fact is like maybe that's not as true as we might want it to be. And so that's why we're so engaged in trying to build out the product and build out the company in a way that can support those sorts of situations and circumstances to mitigate against that sort of choice being made in kind of a pandemic like environment that we just went through.
Yeah. So now you said you're headquartered in the DC area, but you have satellite offices. So you already were distributed, but a year and a half ago you went fully remote, I'm presuming, just like everybody else, true?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. We went fully remote in I think like the second or third week of March,
Yeah.
something like that.
March 16th here. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. Did that have a big impact on your company? I mean, distributed to remote is one thing, right? It's not that easy, because generally when you're distributed, you have offices in other places. So and you being in operations, was that a big challenge for you?
It was. I think we were very lucky. Everfli is very lucky because we've always been a very digitally focused and oriented company, and so I think for us the transition was very very smooth, smoother than was expected. I think,
Mhm.
which is a good thing. And so I think for me, it presented an interesting opportunity in a couple different ways. So one is usually I'm oriented towards the scaling up of resources and organization, and in this case a lot of my responsibilities were oriented towards scaling down. And I think a lot of even in terms of building a budget, usually you're building it for expansion and within the office, right? And in this case it was like, well, we can cut a lot of things because we're not using the office. And
Mhm.
so I think that for me it was an interesting experience in kind of having an opposite side of execution of maybe maybe the other side of the same coin
Mhm.
that I hadn't run into in the past. And then the other side is, once we were fully remote and once we made the transition, the teams were operating efficiently. The kind of the operation support was very minimal. At most, it was like a few shipping related things, a few, vendors and contractors just to kind of keep the wheels running while people are away from the office and things like that. But it wasn't super significant for me. And so that actually enabled me to be able to work with some of the other teams and to provide additional support where maybe they were seeing an increase in their workload as a result of having to work remotely and having people leave in the middle of something or having someone make a transition within the company. And so that allowed me to have a lot more exposure to elements of the business that I'm interested in just personally because
Mhm.
like I mentioned, I like the strategic level of
Yeah.
understanding a company, and so being able to be exposed to those other parts of the company to me was very interesting and helpful.
Yeah, and I have to believe it had a pretty big impact on your IT support group, right?
Yeah, it was definitely interesting for them for sure. They went remote, but then we're also directly servicing the team members spread across the country and even in London and
Yeah.
a few other locations. So
And typically the IT support group, they themselves they're okay with the remote, but then now that they have to have help the rest of the company. And just out of curiosity, how many employees do you have?
we are around between 500 and 600, I believe.
Oh, you're a good sized company.
And yep, yeah, no, definitely, we're definitely pretty solid. And for those interested, we certainly have openings on the website, so you can go check us out.
Right? And are you that so this is one of the competitive things now that people are talking about. Since you have openings, do you plan to go back to 9 to 5 at the office, or are you going to be continue with remote or go somewhat hybrid?
Yeah, so I think even before COVID came around and the pandemic hit, we actually had a pretty substantive remote workforce because we had so many K-12 team members who were divested across the country, directly helping implement courses and things like that into the classroom. And we have a pretty solid engineering base, and so a lot of those engineers were remote. And so while we're in the middle of building out this, brand new HQ and staffing it and things like that, we also had like a parallel element of a pretty solid remote workforce. And so I think going forward, I think we're going to try and kind of pursue that same hybrid. And I think we'll hire, locally, which is to say within the office for the relevant positions that we think are going to be more uh, that are going to be able to influence the productivity and the collaboration more directly. And then if there is a way to, orient a remote workforce or people that are interested in working remotely, then we are certainly open to that and engaging in that discussion on kind of a managerial and, talent related level.
Yeah, and since you're not too far from the corporate headquarters, do you think you'll be going back to the office on a regular basis, or do you think it'll be more of a hybrid situation for you?
I definitely anticipate. I loved working remotely.
Mhm.
So for me personally, I definitely appreciate it and enjoyed it a lot. I find it to be, more for me personally. Again, I think different people are going to react differently, but I found it to be more productive because there are fewer distractions, fewer things breaking. But I think that for me, going back is I'll have to be in the office pretty consistently, pretty regularly. And I think part of that is, for someone in my role, like we have an element in kind of if something goes wrong, like, there's a toilet overrunning, like who are people going to call, right? They're going to call the operations, the facilities, the
Mhm.
office manager, right? And those are the people that report to me or that, I'm directly filling in for or whatever. And then there's also like I think the security element's one of the biggest. And so you need to have identified people within the office who know what to do in the case of a fire or some sort of other security incident. And I think that people like me in my role, people are going to, even if that maybe the workload is shifted or different from what it was pre-pandemic. I think that you'll want those sorts of people in the office to be able to facilitate those immediate needs.
Yeah, and then it's funny because we went from you know business as usual to remote overnight. Basically, it was within a week, and
Yep.
now we're slowly going back to what the way it used to be. And you find that most of your employees are like you that hey, I really like this remote. I think I want to stick with it.
I will have more information on that in a week or two, where our goal is to do something of a survey to kind of see what best meets our kind of company culture and how the employees are feeling about different elements of that. So I don't know for sure. I certainly have talked to people who are, begging their manager to come into the office, and they're really excited about it. And then I've talked to plenty of other people who are, are while they, I mean, they love their job and love working at the company, they don't want to go back to the office. And so I think that, we'll see. It'll also be interesting to see how kind of the remote people have moved remote, if they're going to come back to the office, if they're going to try and stay remote. I think there's a lot of that still needs to shake out, because, we haven't fully done our return to office yet. And we're barely open right now. And so I think that'll come to light a little bit more. Personally, I think one of the things I see the most about, or the most significant reason or talked about reason that I see people interested in coming back to the office has been about a couple months ago. It was parents wanting to kind of get out of the house, be away from the kids, less distraction, right? But as we open up, those kids are going to school, so I don't think that becomes an issue, even though as much as it was talked about. And then second is, I think socially, is people are excited to come back to the office because they want to, be able to go out and have happy hours and have lunch with their friends at the office and that sort of thing. But I don't really see how that translates to a need, or it will, kind of follow through into a continued desire to work in the office. And
Mm.
so personally, I anticipate there being more of a work, whether remotely, maybe in the office, and then outside of work, maybe going and getting that social interaction that people are so desperate for.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be a rush back to the office for a while, and then people are going to be like, I kind of like that. When I like not
Yeah.
having to deal with traffic in the morning.
Yeah, 1,000%, 1,000%. And the thing is especially in here, our global HQ, right, is in DC, and the whole area over here, like we expect to have significant population growth. And so like traffic and commute times and things like that, they're all going to get significantly worse. Despite, that was like, regardless of the fact that more people are going to want to drive in now because they don't want to take public transportation and things like that. So I think across the board, I think there will be a lot of hype at the beginning, and then I think it'll slow off.
Yeah,
But we'll see what happens.
yeah,
I think collaboration is one of the things that I've seen, at least one of the most individual and particular metrics that I've seen being raised as a reason to be in the office versus being able to do pretty much anything remotely,
mm.
within our business and context.
Well,
And so I'm curious to see what that translates to, in the office, and what collaboration is really going to mean now that we're focusing on it as an in-office activity and pursuit outside of a, digital existence.
true, but and it's interesting because you can collaborate at 11 a.m. just as well as you can at 9 a.m. So I think people are going to be like, I think I'll go into the office. I'll leave around 10 a.m. instead of.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think it'll be traffic all morning instead of just during, 7 to 9.
True. Well, Britton, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been great talking to you. Good luck with your transition. You're going to be a busy man again. It sounds like.
It's been picking up for sure.
Yeah. So you'll get back to what you used to be doing instead of helping all the other departments.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what they're gonna do. Well,
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, again, thank you again, and best of luck with Everfli. It sounds like a great cause there.
thank you. Yes, I agree.